The year was 1944. Europe was burning. Smoke filled the air, flames swallowed the ground, and humanity was disappearing from both sides. But in the middle of this collapsing continent, a story was taking shape, one the world never tried to understand. This is the story of female soldiers who were captured by the Nazis. And what happened to them was far darker than anything you can imagine. On the Eastern Front, Soviet Lieutenant Anastasia Volkova had been separated from her unit. The freezing wind cut her face like a blade. Broken villages surrounded her, shattered houses, and patches of blood scattered across the snow, all of it reminding her that she was wandering through the valley of death. As she tried to hide inside a ruined barn, a German patrol caught her. She fought till her last breath, but ultimately, she was taken prisoner. A blindfold was tied around her eyes, her hands were bound behind her back, and she was taken into a fortress that looked silent from the outside, but inside, it was pure terror. This was no ordinary prison. It was a psychological torture machine. Here, prisoners were not just broken, they were slowly erased from within. Anastasia was thrown into a cold, damp stone cell. Names carved on the walls told her how many souls had already crumbled here. At night, bright lights were flashed into her eyes. She was woken up every 2 hours, forced to stand for hours, and mentally pushed to the edge. The Nazis weren't trying to hurt her physically, they wanted her mind to collapse. On the third day, another woman was brought into the fortress. British Special Operations Agent Claire Hartman. She was thrown into a cell, just like Anastasia, separated by a thin stone wall. For the first few days, they only heard each other breathing. But then, one night, Claire's faint voice came from the other side. If they couldn't break you, they won't break me either. We're in this together. From that night on, they began telling each other stories through the wall. Anastasia spoke about her Russian village where her father chopped wood every winter. Claire spoke about her sister in England who hid chocolates for her during training. These stories kept them alive. Every method the Nazis used began to fail, because when two broken souls hold each other up, even the greatest cruelty loses power. But inside the fortress was one man determined to destroy that. Bondhauptsturmführer Albrecht Weber. He was a master of psychological warfare. He created lies, twisted stories, and pushed prisoners into doubting their own allies. He took Anastasia for questioning and said, "Your British friend has revealed everything. You're the last one left." Anastasia looked straight into his eyes and said, "If she had talked, you wouldn't be telling me this." For the first time, Weber's expression changed. He realized these two women were stronger than he had imagined. He separated them into different wings, deprived them of sleep, reduced their food, and tried to convince each that the other was dead. But he could not sever the invisible thread between them, hope. Then one day, something happened that changed the entire balance of the fortress. Distant explosions shook the earth. The walls trembled. Soldiers were shouting. Everyone thought Soviet tanks had launched an attack. But the truth was even stranger. The Nazi regiment itself was collapsing from within. The Allies were advancing fast, and German forces were abandoning the fortress. The order was simple: leave no prisoners alive. A young German soldier, his eyes filled with fear and exhaustion, approached Anastasia and whispered, "Run, if you can." He unlocked her restraints. The war had stolen his soul, but a tiny spark of humanity still remained, and that small spark saved Anastasia's life. Now she had only one mission: find Claire. She ran through the collapsing fortress, dodging debris and flames. In the darkest corner of the old dungeon, she heard a faint voice. Anya. It was Claire. Weak, injured, but alive. Anastasia lifted her up, and the two began escaping through corridors that were crumbling around them. Walls were collapsing, beams were burning, and dust clouded the air. But they knew one thing: if they stopped now, their story would end here. A section of the outer wall gave way, revealing the snowy ground outside. They jumped through the opening and fell into the snow. In the distance, Soviet tanks rumbled forward, aircraft circled the sky, and the entire horizon shook with war. The world was still burning, but their captivity was finally over. Years later, in front of a war memorial, two old women sat quietly, one Russian, one British. Their faces bore the marks of time, but their eyes still carried the same spark they had once shared through a stone wall. Anastasia and Claire never told the world their story, because sometimes the world is too cruel to hear the truth. But they knew one thing: that the Nazis had tried to break them, not just with cruelty, but by destroying their spirit. And yet, they survived. Their survival, their friendship, that was their true victory.